Hello everyone, this is Aryan Thakkar, your coach and mentor, and welcome back to my YouTube channel on Aryan Tutorials, where in this video I'll be taking up your ISC Class 12's Prism's short story, that is The Medicine Bag, written by Virginia Driving Hawk Sneve. Now, before I get started, I want to request you that if you haven't read through your text, then immediately stop this video. First, go sit down with your book and go through the entire story. Get your hands onto the key details and events, and then come back to this insightful, detailed revision video on the medicine bag. At the same time, when you will be going through my lecture, it's a request that kindly sit with a copy and a pen and take note or scribble through whatever I'll be highlighting while teaching, because it will help you to elevate your answer in your board examination. So let's quickly discover The Medicine Bag, written by Virginia Driving Hawk Sneve. Now, this is a moving means it is a very emotional short story. Okay, it is a emotional short story which is about identity, heritage. Heritage means embracing. It is about embracing one's own cultural roots and lineage. It is about shame, that is embarrassment, transitioning into a cultural continuity, that is a generational legacy. This story is a powerful exploration of what it means to bridge the two worlds while nurturing one's root. So, although Martin, through the narrative of Martin, a young boy, he struggles to embrace his own Sioux tradition and his own heritage. However, he transitions from being embarrassed to that of acknowledging his own identity, and he takes pride in his cultural legacy, through which the stories bridges that generational gap between the present, past, and the future. ठीक है? चलो, let's start with the summary, the key events which takes place in the story. Part 1 is about bragging and hidden shame. Now, pride in the past. Martin and his sister Cheryl. Martin had a younger sister named Cheryl. They proudly boast about their Sioux grandfather. Now, his grandfather was a Native American, ठीक है, who came from a SIOUX Sioux tribe. He belonged to a Sioux tribe and came from a rosebud reservation where Native Americans lived, Rosebud Reservation of South Dakota. ठीक है? He came from the Rosebud Reservation of South Dakota, whose name was Joe Iron Shell. His grandfather's name was Joe Iron Shell, and they exaggerated stories to impress their city friends who were unfamiliar with the real, with the real or the actual Native American life. Crafting means making or curating. ठीक है? Making or curating tales, stories that match their peers, that is their social circles expectation rather than reality. So they exaggerated a great deal about their tribal grandfather, their Native American Sioux grandfather, in order to impress their friends, because they wanted to have an upper hand and they wanted to look cool in front of their friends. However, in reality, their pride was even selective. Though they boasted a great deal about their grandfather, and they proudly, alongside, they proudly showed the moccasins. Moccasins का मतलब हो गया suede leather boots. ठीक है? Now, boys को already suede के बारे में पता होगा. It is that velvety sort of textured leather, that is जिससे हम लोग suede shoes जो बोलते हैं, moccasins उनको बोला जाता है. So suede leather shoes or boots, drums, chants, but never gave grandpa's photograph to his friends. Although they showed all the items, all the souvenirs which they brought from grandfather from South Dakota, they showed it off to their friends, but they never had the audacity or guts to show grandfather's photograph, because the way they had painted or portrayed grandfather before their friends, like this is how he is, and this is how cool he looks, and this is the way he talks, and this is what he wears, In reality, grandfather did not match that glamorous movie Indian stereotype which perpetuated in the popular culture. So the way television had or the media had painted the picture of the Native American people, grandfather did not fit into that picture or into that narrative, and that is why they never showed grandfather's picture to their friends. Instead of that, grandfather was actually very old. He was frail, he was slender, बहुत दुबले पतले थे, and he was very poorly dressed, and he lived in a shack means basically a tent which was made out of canopy on the reservation, Rosebud Reservation of South Dakota. And Martin felt ashamed of his real heritage, where he was caught between the romanticized version which he shared with his friends and alongside the authentic reality that he tries to hide. He struggles to reveal his true identity, his grandfather's true identity, feeling, feeling ashamed that maybe he might be criticized for the way he has bragged about his grandfather before his friends. But however, the game changes when grandfather all of a sudden one day decides to pay a visit in Iowa. This is the city where Martin and his family lived. So, since grandfather was feeling a little lonely, and after the summer vacation, when Martin and his family had come back, he felt isolated or he felt emotionally vulnerable. That is why he decided to travel to his only family, which was resided in Iowa, so that at the same time with a purpose. He also had a cause that he wanted to pass on this medicine bag, the title of the story which has been used. Okay, there is a symbolic significance of that medicine bag. We'll come to that थोड़ी देर में, ठीक है. But then there is a shocking sight. Grandfather arrives alone walking through the neighborhood surrounded by barking dogs and children. Because why was he being barked at by the dogs, or why were children surrounding him or following him? Because the way he was dressed, he did not fit into the city like that of a lifestyle. Okay? He was oddly dressed for a city, and Martin was mortified. He was immediately embarrassed looking at grandfather. He recognized that it is his Sioux grandfather, and he felt embarrassed when he recognized him, dreading his friend's reaction. He felt that his friends might criticize him. ठीक है? Then comes your cultural dignity. Grandpa greets Martin formally in his Sioux language. His clothes looked strange in the city, intensifying Martin's embarrassment, yet revealing the clash between the two worlds. This was his struggle to keep up with the city's ideologies. At the same time, he was unable to acknowledge his true culture, his true identity from where he belonged. However, grandfather, when he reached home, he was so tired and exhausted by the journey that he immediately fainted and collapsed. Grandpa faints from exhaustion after traveling alone for days. The family realizes that his physical weakness and loneliness shifting their perspective from embarrassment to concern. And all of a sudden, Martin's embarrassment transforms into concern for grandfather, okay, since he was very old. Then comes your part three. There is a journey, the journey and the guilt, the transition to guilt. He felt embarrassed. A lonely decision. Grandpa had traveled for 2.5 days by bus, and then he walked to find the house. He was lonely after the family left the reservation, demonstrating, highlighting the emotional toll, the heaviness, ठीक है, the burden, emotional burden which he felt from the separation of his homeland, from his family. Then there is a hidden sacrifice. Grandpa had stuffed money inside his boots, which he had saved or stored for his funeral. However, he decides to give it to Martin's mother because he did not want to be a burden while staying along with the family. Money stuffed in grandpa's boots was meant for his funeral, but he offers it so that he won't be a burden, revealing his profound, his deep dignity and selflessness despite the circumstances. And then there is a quiet strength in him. Grandpa's dignity. Dignity means his integrity, his independence, and his courage. ठीक है? His dignity, his independence, and his courage makes him earn respect not only from Martin but from his entire family. And that is the very first moment when Martin begins to feel a sense of pride, replacing shame, marking the beginning of his transformation. a journey from struggling to acknowledge his own culture, accept his own grandfather, uh, to that of accepting him and his cultural roots, which he is about to pass on. Then comes your part 4, that is the medicine bag is revealed. The sacred purpose. Sacred means the religious purpose, the religious motive that goes behind the medicine bag. It is revealed here, where grandpa announces he has come actually to pass on the medicine bag. It is a tradition which demands it to go to the eldest male descendant into their family, continuing an unbroken chain of cultural inheritance. So it is a generational tradition which has been ongoing from generation after generation, and that is why he has come to pass it to the only and the eldest male member of the family. ठीक है? In other words, basically क्या हुआ था कि मार्टिन की मम्मी actually उनकी पोती थी, ग्रैंडपा की पोती. So he was Martin's great grandfather, नाना थे, ठीक है? And Martin's great grandfather had lost his son in a battle, to a war, and he had no male member left. Therefore, the only person that he could pass on to before he died, he had to pass on this medicine back to the male member in their family. That was their custom or tradition. So he decides to pay a visit to अपनी नातीन जो हम लोग बोलते हैं ना, अपनी ग्रैंडचाइल्ड के घर पे, यानी मार्टिन की मम्मी के घर पे आके, एंड मार्टिन जो उसका ग्रेट ग्रैंडचाइल्ड था उसको ये मेडिसिन बैग देना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी था. ठीक है? But there comes the inner conflict in the mind of Martin, where Martin fears being mocked if his friends see the bag. He struggles between modern identity and cultural inheritance, embodying, signifying the tension many young people feel between assimilation and authenticity. Assimilation का मतलब होता है basically acknowledging your own roots. ठीक है? Getting onto the ground reality, that is assimilation. But however, Grandpa said that it is not the right time to pass on the bag. It is only when the time is right and time is right, then he will pass on this back to the only male member. That is what the custom or tradition is. So Grandpa delays the ceremony, believing that everything must happen when the time is right. This patience reflects the traditional wisdom about timing and readiness. It can only be passed on when the person is ready and only when the time is appropriate. Then comes your part 5. When Martin's friends come over, they pay a visit to see grandfather. Instead of Martin feeling embarrassed, finally his embarrassment transforms into appreciation because his friends are really fascinated by seeing grandpa. So friends visit grandpa. Martin's friend finally meet grandpa, and instead of criticizing grandpa, they respond with awe and respect. In other words, they respond with admiration. They admire grandpa for the way he is. And then there is a pride reborn in the mind of Martin. In the mind of Martin. Okay? He feels a sense of pride. Grandpa wears traditional clothes with confidence, and Martin realizes that Grandpa knew all along about his embarrassment. Grandpa already knew that Martin was feeling embarrassed uh, through his presence or through him being here in city. And then there is a shift of identity. This marks the turning point in Martin's identity, where external validation from his friends, it helps him to see the heritage differently, and he starts appreciating his culture. However, part 6 finally comes the time when the sacred legacy is to be passed on, that is, the medicine bag is to be given. The story of the medicine bag, where Grandpa tells the story of iron shell, the vision quest, and the sacred iron which was put inside that bag, where this bag symbolizes adaptation, survival, and spiritual guidance across generation. It has been a part of their family, and it's a customary thing to do that they have to pass on this medicine bag, which has a cultural significance, to the next male heir, okay, to the next male child. Then comes the passing of the medicine bag. Grandpa gives the bag to Martin but tells him not to wear it yet, to wear it here. It must be worn only when he returns back to the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, preserving its sacred context. Like he has to go to Rosebud Reservation, and he has to take up a sacred sage. He has to take up a piece of a sage and then put it inside the bag, and from there on he can wear it, which will provide him protection from evil energies. And there comes your final act where grandpa dies 2 weeks later and Martin completes the ritual by placing the sacred sage. Sage is basically a plant. ठीक है, उसके लीफ को वो डालता है in the back, demonstrating, indicating his acceptance of the heritage and the responsibility which he was now ready to take on. Coming to the critical analysis of this short story, first of all, the central theme is basically identity and heritage. Struggle to accept your own identity and your own cultural roots. Martin struggles with being both modern and American and Sioux. The story traces his journey from shame to acceptance, exploring the complexity of bicultural identity, like struggling to accept his bicultural identity. At the same time, tradition versus modern life is highlighted through the story where the native, the traditions clash with the urban expectation. Grandpa adapts without abandoning his roots and demonstrating, showing that tradition and modernity need not be mutually exclusive. Although he advises Martin, he knows that wearing this medicine bag in a city life would be a little odd. Therefore, he advises Martin before dying that he should only wear it when he goes to reservation. Apart from that, he need not wear it here in city. So, Grandpa is ready to acknowledge and embrace the change, and therefore he expects Martin to also acknowledge his cultural roots and lineage. And that is how the generational gap between the present and the future generation is bridged. ठीक है? The past generation and the present and the future generation is bridged. Then comes your generational continuity. The medicine bag links past, present, and future, where the cultural survival depends upon remembering and respecting our own traditions. It is through recalling and keeping those principles and values which have been passed on by our ancestors, by keeping it to ourselves, although we might adapt to the change, but however we should always go back to our roots. That is the only way to pay tribute and respect to the bygones. Take care. Passing wisdom across generation. Shame and pride. Shame arises from misunderstanding identity, but then true pride replaces shame by understanding one's roots and not from others' approval. So it is at times we just do not have to fit into the narrative of the other person. Rather, the moment we acknowledge our own roots, that is when the journey of, you know, the journey of transition from shame to pride begins. The significance, the importance of medicine bag. The medicine bag serves as a story's central symbol, representing far more than just a physical object. It embodies ancestral wisdom, protection, and cultural memory. It represents responsibility, not decoration or fashion. It carries the weight of history, like the ingredients of the medicine bag. Each carries a story of its own which needs to be embraced, and it has healing powers and it provides divine protection from evil energies. Take care. Suffering and survival, and it links individual identity to collective heritage. It symbolizes invisible threads which connects different generation across. And this medicine bag acts as a bridge between spiritual and physical world. The bag's power lies not in its appearance but in what it represents. बोलते हैं ना कि कभी कभी कुछ चीजों को अगर मान लेते हैं तो it has the power to protect you. At times you don't have to get into the ifs and buts and why and what of behind every logic. Rather, at times you should just acknowledge the belief of the other person, and it might have some sort of a divine protection hidden in it. ठीक है. So the bag's power lies not in its appearance but in what it represents. That is the continuation of culture against all the odds. Coming to the irony in the story, expectation versus reality. However, Martin feels ridicule, he feels embarrassed from his friends but receives admiration instead. This anxiety about judgment proves unfounded, revealing how our fears often distort, means break reality. At times we tend to assume things, like बहुत सारी चीजें जो नहीं भी होती है, we just tend to sit and anticipate and crack our head onto it, and it turns out to be totally different. That is what happens with Martin. Strength in weakness. Grandpa seems weak and frail, yet shows great strength through his journey, dignity, and cultural commitment. And then there is an invisible power of the medicine bag. The medicine bag represents invisible power rather than just visible status. It is a symbol of true heritage, which isn't displayed for others, it is just carried within, inside a person. Coming to symbolism, medicine bag is a very important symbol here, which symbolizes heritage, spiritual strength, and cultural continuity across generation, and the ultimate symbol of responsibility and identity. While money in boots is a symbol of dignity and pride, self-reliance, self-independency, and the refusal to be a burden despite circumstances, that is his sacrifice. Sage, which Martins put inside the bag, is a symbol of purification and tradition and spiritual cleansing. Martin's act of placing sage completes this acceptance. Journey which Grandpa takes, the cultural reconnection and the physical distance one must travel to bridge traditional gaps. So, Martin had to take a spiritual journey while Grandpa had to take a physical journey in order to complete that traditional cycle. Clothing symbolizes identity and pride. What seems strange in one context holds deep meaning in the other, and we should not be quick to judge. Talking about the character sketch of Grandpa, Joe Iron Shell Grandpa stands as a story's moral and spiritual center. He's wise, he's dignified, and he's deeply traditional. He embodies, he encapsulates the strength of a cultural continuity, and despite his physical frailty, he's physically weak, he demonstrates, showcases remarkable resilience through his solitary means his own discretionary journey to the city. He is deeply spiritual, yet he is practical, understanding both the sacred significance of the tradition and the realities of the modern life, that Martin feels embarrassed. His decision to travel alone, his patient waiting for the right moment, and his awareness of Martin's embarrassment all reveal profound wisdom, that he was wise of a person. So he was wise, he was dignified, and he was deeply traditional. So Grandpa serves as a bridge between old CU culture and the modern world, adapting without compromising his identity. ठीक है? He learns to adapt with Martin's embarrassment, at the same time not giving up on his own cultural roots. He wears traditional clothes with pride, speaks his language, and carries the medicine bag not as a performance but as an authentic expression. So his quiet strength and cultural wisdom that transcends, that means that is passed on, surpasses physical limitation. On the other hand, talking about Martin's character sketch, Martin represents the teenager. He's the teenager who's torn, split between embarrassment and pride, navigating, trying to find out the way of the complex terrain of bicultural identity. And at the story's beginning, he's deeply influenced by peer pressure, preferring romanticized version of his heritage over authentic connection. However, his initial shame transforms into growing awareness, where he felt mortified, that is, embarrassed by his grandfather's appearance. Through witnessing grandfather's dignity, his friends' respect, Martin begins to question his prejudice and he transforms into a matured individual. Martins grows into cultural awareness and responsibility, accepting the medicine bag and all it represents. And then final maturity breaks when he places the sacred sage in the bag, through which Martin demonstrates understanding that heritage is carried within, not displayed with validation. His emotional growth and self realization through confronting internalized means internal shame is what marks his transition. Talking about Cheryl, Cheryl is not very that important of a character. Rather, talking about some of the themes which we already have discussed is identity crisis, which Martin undergoes, the cultural heritage through medicine bag. There is a generational legacy, a responsibility to honor and to pass on that generational, that generational, what do I say, souvenir from one generation to another. Shame versus pride, tradition versus modernity, and acceptance of the roots. These are some of the themes of the story, and the phrases which you can use in your answer are: the medicine bag was not just an ornament but a responsibility. Martin shame slowly transformed into pride, and true strength lies in the quiet dignity. Heritage cannot be worn for display, but it must be carried within. And grandpa traveled not for comfort but for continuity. So these are some of the good lines which you can use in your answer to elevate your answer. And with this, we come to the end of the medicine bag. I hope you all would have liked the way I have explained. And if you're liking my content, then don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this YouTube channel where we come out with quality content associated with English, economics, and commerce. I hope you're having a great time preparing for your examination. Till then, keep studying, keep smiling. Take care. Bye bye.